Jim, we have a question for the late night drive-thru, and it is from Ryan Dunn in Los Angeles, California. Like you and the rest of the cult of Cornette, I'm less interested in the current product and find the flippy shit less entertaining than the Four Horsemen breaking Dusty's arm and the Mega Powers colliding. I think it was actually the Mega Powers exploding, but either way. When only true insiders had dirt sheets and both wrestlers and their promotions preserved the impression that pro wrestling was a true athletic competition, not an exercise in making sure all the guys outside of the ring are in a position to catch the dude about to dive off the top. So my question is, with it now being possible for anybody with an internet connection to publish dirt sheets and spill secrets about the business, and with much of the WWE's business model structured around social media and developing content for its media empire, meaning shows with backstage access, documentaries about the real history of pro wrestling, etc., is it possible to put the genie back in the bottle and go back to kayfabe, or have we turned a corner and the business will never be the same?
Yes. No. Yes, we have turned a corner. No, it'll never be the same. Once again, and people have such a fucking problem grasping this simple concept. We told them how the shell game worked and expect them to still keep playing. It's not going to fucking happen. And for everybody who says, well, actors, they go behind the scenes and talk about their roles and everything, you fucking morons. How many times have I got to say this shit? Wrestlers are not actors. The easiest thing, the comparison that I can make is there are no behind the scenes documentaries of a magician doing his shows that are authorized by the magician. Because then it would basically tell everybody how he did all his fucking tricks. So that's the last thing they want. Because magicians, above all people, know that, well, if everybody sees through all this shit, they know it's fucking a trick, but they don't know how I do it. And the object is to make it look as good as possible so people suspend their disbelief and go, how the fuck did they do that? And the more you know about the preparation or the building of the sets or the props or the fucking palming or the sleight of hand or the fucking misdirection or blah, 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 then you are limiting your audience. Instead of people who want to see people actually work magic, you are limiting your audience to people who are such fans of magic that they're nerds about the whole process and they want to know how everything is done and built. Which group do you think is bigger? People who just want to see magic, or people who want to study how it's done and spend their life and make that their main hobby?
I guess there's two things to look at here. One is, even if people know, look, I recently put on the Super Podcast audio of Wild Red Berry on Groucho Marx's television show, You Bet Your Life.
You Bet Your Life.
And Groucho's making jokes about wrestling being fake. So there's always, it's not like all of a sudden in the 80s, everyone found out it was fake. There were always whispers. People always thought, but people lost themselves in it. So it's just now.
And it was possible to do that because especially the top talent and the best promotions and at the highest level and in the main events, there was obviously, but nobody, whether they could work or not, or whether they were a talent or not, was allowed to use invisible hand grenades. They didn't break out in dance routines in the middle of the match, and nobody flipped people with their dicks and blah, blah, blah. And if you hit a guy with the same move 50 times in the same match and didn't beat him with it, then the booker would yell at you or fire you and things like that. But at the top level, everything was presented seriously as a fucking fight or a contest. And if the guys were good enough and the buildup was good enough and the situation was right, you could lose yourself in that. So I'm not saying that nobody has ever known that wrestling was work and all of a sudden, oh God, we found out and now it's fucked. They knew, but they had no way to fucking, well, they thought they knew or they suspected. There was no way to verify the fucking information. There was no way to check on this. There was nobody with experience in the matter would actually say, yes, indeed, so-and-so. And if they did, it was a regional, it was a local newspaper. It wasn't national all at one time or worldwide all at one time.
Plus, it's about the presentation. If you present the show and treat it seriously instead of like the fucking Muppet Show, people will treat it seriously as well.
Yes. And that's why the promotions were running major arenas, drawing huge crowds on a regular basis. And each fan may not have spent a ton of money per capita, but there was millions and millions and millions of fans. Now we have not so many millions and millions of fans, but everybody spends more money per head.
But it's easier to also. I mean, there wasn't the merchandising
exactly
back then that there is now. People didn't have a chance to get a Dick the Bruiser plush toy or anything else. But the bigger picture here, and actually the way he put this in the subject line, like we want everyone to do, is, could kayfabe exist in the internet era? So let's look at some alternate wrestling, reality where Vince doesn't go publicly in '89 and say wrestling's fake because he doesn't want to pay the taxes to the Athletic Commission anymore. And let's just say wrestling continued on the way it had been. How would the internet had affected it? Where all of a sudden it's not just a dirt sheet going out to, 5,000 people. All of a sudden any fan has access to information.
Well, and that therein lies another problem. For anybody who wants to know, I mean, guys used to be arrested on serious charges or the victim of major lawsuits, and they just changed territories, moved 3 states over. There's no way to find them. I love those days. You get away with anything. But also it comes down to unfortunately, the difference in the people getting in the business and the way that they're trained and taught. And I guess we talked about this on one of the 18 or 20 shows we do every week recently. I guess in OVW, I was the last one. We were the last ones to teach the guys that above all else, you do not speak smart in public. You do not admit that wrestling is work. You do not associate with people from the other side of the aisle, whether heel or babyface, out in public. And you will adhere to this or you will not be here. That's the way everybody was taught, because that's what was best for the business overall in the long run. And I don't know if the guys these days can contain themselves. The biggest bunch of fucking non-secret keeping loudmouths I've ever seen as a whole in my life. And I like a bunch of them. A bunch of them I don't like. But nobody can keep a fucking secret. Everybody's got to be on their goddamn phone all the time, or on Twitter or on Facebook or on something or other. People talk to more people than I've talked to in my fucking life in the course of a week. So it's a big bunch of blabbermouths. The internet would still have outsiders saying things, but it comes down to if somebody inside the business verifies that, it carries more credibility. And 30 years ago, you could not find anybody inside the business to verify these things in a public forum. And now, is it the chicken or the egg? Do they constantly do it today because there's no reason not to do it because everybody knows everything already anyway? Or would they just not be able to if we wouldn't be having this conversation if wrestling had never been exposed publicly, because I wouldn't have. But now, so it's fucked. I've said many, many times now, I don't understand what the reason is really to do professional wrestling anymore, since the most important part of pro wrestling is to make people believe something is real that is at least manipulated, if not outright phony. Now that we can't do that, there's no reason to do this shit anymore.
There are certainly areas where social media and the internet would have benefited classic wrestling. I mean, when there's a Starrcade and you can really push it on social media and have people live tweeting about how good it is, I could see the benefits there. Two things I think would have really hurt are when you would do a taping and tape 4 weeks of shows in one night, and also masked wrestlers.
Yeah,
Mr. Wrestling 2, The Assassin. It wouldn't be who is it. I've been watching him for 20 years. I still don't know who he is. You would know who he is as soon as you graduated wrestling school.
Well, and but the thing is about taping 4 times in one night, I don't really think that was I've never thought it was a big issue with Raw. And especially in the early years when everybody was screaming all Raw to be live every week to compete with WCW, the ratings were negligible, the difference when it was a live or a taped show. And as long as you don't do anything, like if we had done something in Smoky Mountain, for example, where the first 2 TVs that we taped in a session were leading up to a big show, and then the last 2 TVs of that session were after the big show had happened, if we'd have had the guy that won the belt on the big show come out on the 3rd hour with the belt, that would have been bad. That would have exposed shit. But we didn't. So, I think that's It's basically, it comes down to what we have now is an industry where people perform supposed conflict in the ring for people who know what's going on. And that has a limited appeal and audience because there's never been people in the last 100 years. There's never been this few people actually watching professional wrestling, except maybe for about 10 years ago. I mean, but in the modern era, it fluctuates. But there was, a couple 100,000 people watching Memphis TV on Saturday morning in just one city in America. And now that's the entire audience for Impact or Global or TNA or whatever they're calling themselves this week in the United States of America.